I'm going to try the microphone first. If it is too loud or I am too loud, just put your hand up. I will turn the microphone off. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about leadership in action, reflections on local government, and there's some areas I was told specifically to really speak to. But I want to kind of tell you about my story first. So I was born in Tallahassee, Florida. My mom is here in the front row. I moved her up here about 6 years ago from Tallahassee. My pastor is here. He's not going to raise his hand, but he's the handsome guy in the front row, Pastor Keith. And I brought them here because they were interested in coming. And so they rode down with me, and we rode over to Rodney Scott's barbecue. Thankfully, I'm the one that ate the barbecue. You didn't eat the barbecue, because that could prove interesting talking this late in the afternoon. You may be more interested in a nap after a heavy meal. But nevertheless, in growing up in Tallahassee, a couple of things really kind of stood out for me. One is my parents were both first generation in their family that completed college. My father completed college after doing military service. He served in Vietnam. He was a medic. He was airborne. He was in the heat of combat. He came home. He decided that he would complete his degree after going to Volusia County Community College in Volusia County, Florida, Daytona Beach area, and then finished up in Florida A&M. My mom originally went to school in Jacksonville, Florida, at a business school, but she decided she wasn't quite ready for that. So she worked in the cafeteria for some 9 years. And after that, and during that time, they had a daughter, my sister, who was born in 1964 in Hampton, Virginia. And later on, my mom graduated from college in 1977. And why is that important? I was 5 years old in 1977. And on that particular occasion, when my mom graduated at some 35 years old, I was there. And her sister, my Aunt Montez, worked at Disney, and I had a Mickey Mouse camera. And so I was able to memorialize her graduation with that Mickey Mouse camera in 1977. Why is that important? Because when I was 5 years old, my parents bought me for Christmas a dictionary and a thesaurus. I don't know if you remember when you were 5 years old what you got for Christmas, but I can assure you I was not excited about the dictionary and the thesaurus. In fact, as I shipped this heavy box with the dictionary and the other box with the thesaurus, it's heavy, but no parts are moving around. This is a real problem for me. So, long story short, they were very much interested in education. So, a lot of what I've been able to accomplish is because of the foundation they set to even pay with the humble means they had. And we were living in an apartment complex for me to have a teacher that went to our church that actually spent time with me making sure that I knew how to read at an early age. And so I was blessed and fortunate to marry a teacher who did the same thing. And my older daughter, Janae, who's at the Savannah College of Art and Design, she now is literally just turned 20 on Sunday. She learned how to read at 4 years old. So I know education is important, so I take this opportunity to talk to you all very seriously. So it's my understanding that I'm going to talk with you about political science, local government, citizen leadership, leadership in organizations. And I have some notes. I'm not going to read those things to you, but it's my understanding in terms of the goals for your political science is, one, you got critical thinking. It's something that you want to take away. Understanding the relationships of individuals with their governments and learning the rights and responsibilities of citizens. All of these things are things I'm very familiar with. So I'm going to talk with you about those, and hopefully I'll share some stories that will be really interesting to you as we go along the way. So the first thing I want to really talk with you about today is this topic of ethics and integrity. And how many of you have a working definition that you use for integrity? Anybody? Go right ahead. Say your name and
Cadet Holbein. My definition of integrity is doing what you're supposed to when nobody's looking, sir.
Perfect. I was going to say doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Okay? So let's talk about this ethics and integrity thing. How many of you are aware that about 1990 in South Carolina, there were some issues with ethics and integrity. I'm talking about Operation Lost Trust, to be very specific. The guy on the screen is a lobbyist. He was a former member of the South Carolina General Assembly. He caught up some 29 of his closest friends by handing out cash, and the SLED and FBI got involved in an investigation. Let me tell you a little secret. If you are in a political office, you are not allowed to receive gifts. I myself have to fill out a South Carolina ethics report each year. I have to indicate what do I own by way of property, who pays my salary, of course that's Dorchester County, do I have any other side businesses that would be in conflict with that, who pays my wife's salary, in this case Dorchester District 2 schools, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that's really interesting about this is you really didn't have anything like an ethics commission until this situation occurred. And I find that very interesting because you would think that those folks in the General Assembly would know better. Well, I'm going to show you something else. How many of you have seen this heading before? 1 decade, 13 sheriffs accused. That's South Carolina. How many counties in South Carolina? Anybody? Somebody? Who's from South Carolina? Go ahead, sir. 46 counties. Yeah, 13 in the last decade, last 10 years, been accused of a crime. Some of these were misdemeanors. Some of them were a little bit more serious. My birthday is May 7th. May 7th. Guess what I got for my birthday this year? How about that one? Sheriff and Chief Deputy indicted on excessive force and cover-up charges. Alex Big A Underwood, May 7th of this year. Real problems and challenges when the chief law enforcement officer of the county is being indicted. So, I share those things and give you that backdrop to talk with you about something that I've come to really understand. And really kind of a couple of questions that I'll pose to you, okay? One thing I think about is government for sale, and if so, who's buying? Is government for sale, and if so, who's buying? Any thoughts on that? Is government for sale? Nobody? Yes, sir.
You do have super PACs and lobbyists.
Super PACs and lobbyists, definitely. Is government for sale?
Usually, people who spend more money on campaigns tend to do better.
Okay, definitely, definitely. Anybody else? Any thoughts on it? Yes?
Anything for sale at the right price.
Say it again?
Anything is for sale.
Anything is for sale at the right price. Interesting. I had a teacher back in Virginia. He said, I'm not keeping anything but my wife. Everything else is for sale. Everything else is for sale. Why do I mention that? I mention that very specifically. I talked with you about those situations and these issues with ethics. And so I've come to believe something, and that is, to the village, we are all idiots. You said, what in the world is Ward talking about? Very specifically, every time another government official messes up, doesn't really matter if it's another organization, doesn't really matter if it's another official. They say, what? What do you say? The government is corrupt. Is that right? The government is corrupt. I'm not on the tape, but the government is corrupt. The government is corrupt. So, after over 20 years in government, I've come to really believe that to the village, we are all idiots. So it's our responsibility to try to restore the trust in government. And I think that's very important. Again, Operation Lost Trust, summer of 1990, more than 24 lawmakers, lobbyists, and others were caught participating in political corruption, taking bribes, indicted, spent time in prison. So I want to kind of transition. I want you to think about two messages. One message is a very old message. Most of you know this. It says that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Anybody know who said that? Who said that? Go right ahead.
Abraham Lincoln.
When did he say that?
Occasional address.
Gettysburg Address. How long is that? 300 words. Not a long speech, but a very powerful speech. Now let's kind of go a little bit forward. A few years after that happened, anybody heard this quote? "And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Who said that? Anybody? Somebody? This is political science, right?
Yeah, Kennedy.
Kennedy. John F. Kennedy. Very good. Why am I asking these questions? Because both of them put forth a challenge. And that challenge was not what people that are in the government can do, but what is it as citizens that you can do? Because each of us as citizens has a specific responsibility. Anybody think about what some of those responsibilities might be? Basic stuff. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Voting. Funny you mentioned that. I got a little story. I'm going to tell it to you. We had a council member, Con Chellis. Con Chellis served on Dorchester County Council. He won an election to serve in the South Carolina General Assembly in House seat number 94. So as a result of that, he no longer could serve on county council. So a special election had to be held, and that election was held in April of this year. Now, just over 13,000 people were eligible to vote. Have any of you heard me share this story before? If you have, don't ruin it. Anybody heard me share this story? I know you've heard me share this story before. How many people do you think participated in that special election? Anybody? Somebody? 13,000 plus people available and eligible to vote.
4,000.
Lower than that. Go lower.
10%.
Huh?
10%.
Lower than that.
1.
How many? Who said one?
1.
One person voted for a person that was not in the district. Wrote him in on the ballot. How many people? How many? 13,000 were eligible. I told you it was less than 4,000. How many? 0? No more than 0, but less than 4,000. How many?
1,000.
1,000? Nope. 72 people voted to put a sure enough county council member in a chair duly elected to serve, one of 7 in Dorchester County in April of this year. 0.53% voter participation. 0.53% voter participation. Do you know what he did? He was elected in the special election in April. Do you know what he did in May? He voted in May twice, one more time in June, because the budget ordinance for Dorchester County requires 3 readings and a public hearing. He voted on a $140 million budget, and that's just for county government. He also voted on the operating budget for Dorchester School District 2. He also voted on the operating budget for Dorchester School District 4. And how many people voted? 72. I already told you one voted for a guy who was not eligible because he didn't even live in the district. 71 people put a guy in office to vote on a $140 million plus budget. Is that responsible citizenship? That only 71 people out of the 13,000 people that were eligible to vote showed up to put a guy in office to vote on a budget for 1 year over $140 million? We couldn't even get 140, at least 1 million per vote. Ridiculous. I think it is. I don't know what your opinion is on it, but it doesn't stop there. It does not stop there. So you got these 7 county council members, and I serve at the pleasure of these 7 county council members. How did that happen? Back in 1975, the state of South Carolina decided they were going to put in place a local government act, also known as the Home Rule Act. Said, you know what, counties, you got 4 different types of government you can choose from. And you ask the question, well, why is there a line through council? Well, shortly thereafter, they determined that the council form of government was illegal. I'm a county administrator, so I underline the form of government that I work under. But how many of you know what a county administrator does? Ever heard of a county administrator? Anybody? Go right ahead. Heard of it. Who knows? Anybody else ever heard of a county administrator? Go right ahead.
It's like a mayor for the county.
like a mayor for the county. Okay? Let me first clarify something. I am not an elected official. I am appointed by the 7 members of county council. I have to be able to count to 4 at any time, because that's the majority of county council. I serve on a contract. Currently, I'm serving on a contract that is 3 years and 17 days. Why 17 days? Because 17 days is 1 day past the 16th of September, which is when I started working for Dorchester County. So technically my contract runs, so it'll go through September 17th of 2022. That's 20 years with Dorchester County, and that's enough. That's more than enough. So why am I saying that to you? It's not like a countywide mayor. We have a chairman of county council. In our form of government, we don't have a strong council in terms of having a strong mayor. The closest form of government to the one you're describing is the council supervisor. Berkeley County has that form, and they have an elected supervisor, Johnny Cribb, who is basically like a countywide mayor who also serves as the administrator responsible for day-to-day functions. Why am I asking you these questions? So then who, if we have part-time county council members that get paid $20,000 a year, is responsible for running the government? Now, other than on Lake Mary and those other organizations that were named, I don't get to vote on anything. I just make recommendations. So I want to be clear about that. I am not a politician. No matter how polished I may appear to be at this very moment, I am not a politician. So here's the deal. People go to school. For me, it was going to school to pursue a degree in public administration at the University of Kansas. Specifically, the concentration was city management. Because the same way the businesses have CEOs, I'm what is called a chief administrative officer, a CAO, responsible for day-to-day operations of that county, in this case Dorchester, with some 160,000 residents and a budget in excess of $140 million a year. So I'm mentioning all these things to say this to you. More importantly, there are a few people in this room that were born in 1975. I'm one of them, but up until that time, do you know how county governments were governed in the state of South Carolina? Through a supply bill. 46 counties, 46 senators. Those 46 senators would get together in Columbia and decide how they would divvy up the state's money, and they would have a supply bill. You didn't have county council members that you could reach out and touch at the grocery store and say, I have a problem with this. Not that too many people obviously are reaching out and touching county council members, since we just had an election and only 71 people voted for a council. So the point I'm making here is this. First and foremost, I want you to understand, in terms of local government, it's the closest government to you, but if you don't take advantage of the opportunities to participate as a citizen, then it might as well be a situation where that government is coming out of Columbia or coming out of Washington, D.C. So I challenge you not only to vote, but there are other ways in which you can participate, and I'm going to share those ways with you. And one of the ways in which you can participate is you can serve on a board or commission. Each of the county council members appoints members to boards and commissions. Planning commissions, and what do planning commissions do? They literally go through a process of coming up with a comprehensive plan every 10 years, which they update every 5 years to determine what can be developed and where in a community. They do that on the municipal level, they do that on the county level, and in doing that, they are really determining what's going to happen in any community. So I challenge you to consider participating there. Also, I want you to consider volunteering. You say volunteering, what does that have to do with government? How many of you know that the majority of firefighters in the United States of America are volunteer firefighters? Yeah. So you can volunteer to serve in local government. Not only can you volunteer as a firefighter, how many of you know that even though we have law enforcement, we have the sheriff's department, many different police departments in this area, you also have volunteers that come in and work as reserve deputies. Many different ways to volunteer. I would challenge you, even if you consider not doing either one of those, even if you consider doing an internship, paid or unpaid internship, to learn more about local government. We'd be glad to have you. Charleston would be glad to have you. The municipalities would be glad to have you. Why? So you can learn more about local government and really understand what it takes to to move forward in terms of making our community better. Because the reality of it is, September 17th, 2022, I'm moving on. 25 years and 20 in Dorchester County is more than enough in local government for me. Spent a lot of time away from my family, a lot of trips to Washington, a lot of trips to Columbia, a lot of late night county council meetings, day-to-day work, gained about 70 pounds, no longer have hair. I think I'm okay to move on. But you, it's your turn now. And why is it your turn? Because there's a changing of the guard. How many of you know or have ever heard of Jim Clyburn, congressman from the 6th Congressional District, representing South Carolina? Well, how old do you think Jim Clyburn is? Yeah, Jim Clyburn is about 79 years old. How many of you have ever heard of Senator John Matthews, who represents a portion of Berkeley and Dorchester and Colleton and Hampton and Orangeburg County in the General Assembly in South Carolina? Well, I'm gonna let you know a little secret. Those two guys are the same age. I have a council chairman. His name is George Bailey. George Bailey, got it? Mr. Bailey was in the General Assembly for 20 plus years. He's been on county council now for 8 years, going on 9 years. He's 82 years old. Mr. Bailey's wife, Ann, doesn't want him to serve anymore. I have a mayor, Charles Ackerman. He's a general in the Army. Mayor Ackerman said, I'm not running anymore during the last election. Guess what? They wrote Mayor Ackerman in, and he became the mayor again. I called Mayor Ackerman. We have a project. I talked with you about the Lake Marion Regional Water Agency. Was talked about in the introduction. We had that project. What's interesting about that particular project is running right through Harleyville, South Carolina. So we got a water project in Santee, South Carolina, up by 95. And that project runs from Santee all the way down to Ridgeville off of I-26 at South Carolina Highway 27, delivering fresh, clean water. Now, I just had a council member on Sunday. Her house was in a fire. Total loss. Batham house off of Highway 78 near St. George, just past I-95. Why am I mentioning this? We've been fighting with the towns to try to get them to tie on to this public water system so that we can try to preserve life. Even if they don't decide to take water at individual households, every line that we run has a fire hydrant every 500 feet. So what does that do? Then it provides a reliable source of water to fight fires, to keep people safe. Not only does it do that, but it actually saves them money because we are able to reduce their homeowners coverage for property insurance. But arguing with people about things we shouldn't be arguing with them about, as basic as water. Now, before I came into county government, I worked in city government. And I remember coming to Dorchester County, and I remember them saying, we don't have water. And I was like, what do you mean you don't have water? Doesn't everybody have water? Well, no, everybody doesn't have water. In fact, the 6th Congressional District that Congressman Clyburn represents is known as the stroke belt on the United States. Highest incident of stroke and diabetes in the nation. So what did he do? He decided that he wanted to make a difference. So he put himself in Congress by running for election and re-election every 2 years. And some 20 plus years ago, they started the Lake Marion project. Now we've got a project where they spent over $80 million to take water to address those issues of fire protection, to address the issues of diabetes so people have clean water. And then one more thing. Also, if you've been paying attention, there's a little company called DHL, and they're gonna put $100 million in Dorchester County near St. George that has a population of 2,000 people. They're gonna create 450 jobs, investing $100 million so that people can work closer to home. And because there's water there, that will support economic development, which is net new money coming into the community. And then that will foster community development, which means you can go buy a hamburger because there'll be more places to do that. Which means you can buy groceries because there'll be more places to do that. Which means the existing businesses there can then employ more people because there's more money in the community. So all of that really has to do with something that you should be involved in every day. Not as simple as voting, but becoming involved in your community. So I thought about a list of things that I would share with you and kind of get your reaction to it in terms of what it brings to your mind. And I'm going to share this list and see what comes to your mind, what are the things from this list that you have in common. So I'm going to see actually if I can find my list, because I'm struggling to find my list. So roads, education, national defense, speed limits, spending and resource allocation, clean water, presidents, governors, senators, councils. What do all these things have in common? They're all controlled by politics. They're all controlled by politics. So politics are very important to us and for us. So there's one other thing that I wanted to really talk with you about, and that's leadership. Leadership. Each of you has an opportunity to be a leader. And being a leader doesn't mean that you have to hold an appointed office or an elected office. You don't have to be a leader on the campus because you were selected by your peers to lead or appointed to lead. But you can be a leader if you're willing to serve. So I want to talk with you about something that I think is very important and probably one of the single most important things that I've ever learned, which is servant leadership. And there's a story in the Old Testament of the Bible, in the book of John, and it talks about John and James, the sons of Zebedee. And as the story is told, these were disciples of Jesus Christ, and he decided that he would choose these 12, a motley crew, one might say, because there was even one among them who betrayed him. And in choosing these two had the unmitigated gall to say, hey, you know this place heaven that you talk about that you're going to one day, when you get there, I want to know who's going to sit on your right-hand side and your left-hand side. Now, you can imagine the others that were with him said, really guys? So you're trying to get dibs on sitting on the left-hand side and the right-hand side? We all been walking with him the same amount of time. How come you guys are trying to get first dibs on that? Well, the thing that's funny about that is he responded in a very strange way. He responded and he told them that it's all about servant leadership. What does that mean? If you want to be the chief, you want to be the head guy, you got to serve everybody. If you want to be the leader, then you got to be willing to give your life for everybody else. So, in that, what we've come to learn is leadership is a sacrifice. And leaders have to do certain things, most of all, and this is the reason why we don't have, in my opinion, as many people stepping up for leadership, and in particular political leadership, is because even though I provided a paper copy, you've got an electronic device, you've got a pad, I don't know if that's an iPad or not, an iPad, and you can go on that, and you can say, at any given time, I'm going to take a picture of Mr. Ward. Hey, look, they've got some black dude in here talking to us at the Citadel. He's boring me to death. He's the only thing between me and getting to the mess hall. You know why? Because everybody now can broadcast the news. Everybody now can express an opinion. Everybody now can reach mass audiences of people. And guess what? Maybe some of the people in political office take exception to the fact that instead of people now interfacing with them person to person, calling them on the phone, maybe even sending an email or a text message associated with the name, they take exception to the fact that some guy named Anonymous can say anything and everything, whether it's truthful or not, about some things that are going on. And so what I'm finding now is there is a loss of what I think is best described as common decency, civility. I mean, the ability to agree to disagree without personal attacks. Anybody agree with that? That there's a loss of civility? common decency, the ability to disagree. Now all of a sudden if I disagree, I'm bigoted. Now all of a sudden if I disagree, somehow I'm an ne'er-do-well. Now all of a sudden if I disagree, I need to be run out of town or out of office. Maybe one of those political action committees gets a group of people together that hold like opinions and they raise a bunch of money, dark money. I don't want to be associated with it. I just want to take care of this guy. So that's the society we live in. But the choice is, what are you guys going to do? How are you going to step up? Are you afraid? Are the things that you're doing right now that you're ashamed of? Remember we were talking about integrity. What is integrity again?
Doing the right thing when nobody's watching.
Right. But what is this nobody's watching when the camera's everywhere? What is this nobody's watching when people are taking selfies? Oh, it's going away. It's Instagram. It's just a quick post. It's going to go away. No. You got to do the right thing all the time. Not just for the day, but for the rest of your life. Because the reality of it is, this is a leadership program. And if you guys don't do the right thing, who's going to do the right thing? Who's going to do the right thing if you don't do it? Who's going to be the next leader if you don't step up and do it? So here's my challenge to you. And this is what I've learned. This class called the 33 series is the Quest for Authentic Manhood. And so I've learned these 4 principles that I try to live by. First thing is, you've got to reject passivity. I can't say it's somebody else's responsibility to step up. Let me tell you a little secret. I had a neighbor, still my neighbor right now, Mr. Oshie. He came across the street. He said, I noticed this storm, Dorian, that you lost a tree. And I noticed that you were talking to a guy. And you're going to have to pay him to help you cut this tree down because it's now dead and branches are falling off and it could fall on something and damage your property. I'm off. I'm going to help you. I didn't ask him for help. He came to help me. We stacked it on the side of the road together and the city came and picked it up. Well, I played it forward. I got another neighbor. He's in a wheelchair. He's a veteran. He's a disabled veteran. I got a riding lawnmower. It's like playing games to me, riding on a lawnmower. Because when I was a kid, I had to push the lawnmower. Let me let you in a little secret. I cut a lot of yards for free since I was 12 years old. My dad would load it up in the car and said, we're going to cut so-and-so's yard. I had a veteran, he's in the Air Force, Shane O'Neill. He was deployed overseas to the Middle East several times. He was married to a young wife, Sarah. Sarah kept trying to figure out why her grass wasn't growing as fast as all of her neighbors. Because every time she left home and I was out on a Saturday, I would sneak over and cut her yard. Why? Because Shane was serving. And Shane had a snapper lawnmower, and he used to cut his yard and keep it super neat, but he wasn't there to do it because he was protecting our freedom. So I accepted responsibility. I rejected passivity. I went and cut his yard and snuck until Big Mouth, Mr. Blanco, my other name, George, Jorge, if you will, told her, silly, Jason cuts your yard when you leave home. That's why your grass is not growing. But why am I saying this? Everybody can do something. Being a leader doesn't mean holding a formal office. You can lead just by volunteering to pick up your neighbor's mail when they're out of town, to check on their house, or check on their apartment, keep somebody's dog. It starts small, but then it grows bigger. Why? Because people that serve always serve. I think it's called the Pareto principle. Did I have that right? There's a principle, it's called the 80-20 rule. It says that 20% of the people do what? Anybody? 80% of the work. The leaders do the work. Let me let you know a little secret. Here's the secret. You can't lead from behind. What I just said. You can't lead from behind. What I just said. You gotta say it, and then we can move on. You can't lead from behind. You can't lead from behind. But here's something I want to let you know. You can lead from behind the scenes. You can't lead from behind, but you can lead from behind the scenes. What do you call a person who tells actors and actresses what to do? What's that? You call him a director. Do you see the director on the screen? But who's calling the shots? Exactly. So that's the example. But it's not about the director. It's about the fact that when you are a leader, sometimes you do things. And in this particular case, yeah, his name shows up in the credits, but how many of you guys stay in the theater to watch the credits to see who the director is? Anybody? No. No, you don't. But somebody did the work so you could enjoy the movie. Somebody has to do the work so that you can enjoy clean water. Somebody has to do the work so that when you flush the toilet stool, it goes to the right place and you can still eat oysters. Why am I saying oysters? This guy's weird. Tallest and oysters have to do with one another. Town of Hollywood, South Carolina, ruined oyster beds. Why? Because they didn't keep the poop in the pipe. That's why. So, stuff that you don't think about, somebody's doing that work. There are people that are leading and working and serving every day that you don't think about. You take them for granted. And why do I mention that? Because everybody needs encouragement. The garbage man needs encouragement. The guy that comes by to pick up the leaves or rake the leaves, he needs encouragement. Everybody needs encouragement. That's another way that you can lead. Because I'm going to tell you something. There are 3 types of power that we all have. Most people focus on positional power. That is, I have a position and therefore you have to do what I say. There's another type of power. Anybody in here, probably no engineering majors, I'm gonna go out on a limb. Any engineering major? 1, thank God. 2, thank God for these. 3, anybody else? So let me tell you something. I don't care how smart I think I am. What kind of engineering major are you? Electrical. Mechanical. Electrical. Let me let you know a little secret. These guys have what's called technical power. You know why? Because they understand things about circuits that I don't understand. Now, who's a mechanic? Okay. You know what tribology is in rheology? You know what thermodynamics is? You know what friction and wear are at a high temperature? Look up a guy named C. Fred Higgs III. He's the vice provost of Rice University. And years ago, from the 3rd grade on, we went to school together. Well, he was a NASA scholar. Let me tell you something that he told me about. It was the 3-1-3 rule. When you're making a presentation, the first third of the people, they're all engineers in the room, they probably know what you're talking about. The second third, if they are in electrical or mechanical, they probably can follow you. But the last third of people, unless they're in your specific area of expertise, they can't follow what you're talking about. 3 different thirds, you're making a technical presentation. Why am I mentioning that very specifically? Because there's a thing called technical power. That's the second type of power. First type, positional power. Second type, technical power. But what is the third type? Personality power. Something called influence. How to win friends and influence people. Maybe Dale Carnegie? Yeah. That's the power that gets people to follow you when you're a leader, because you embody the message that you have. But if you don't embody the message that you have, then people call you a hypocrite. They call you a fake. They don't follow you. And let me tell you something. You don't have to be charismatic to have personality power. But you got to be believable. So my question to you is, if you're fortunate enough to have positional power, and you're fortunate enough to have technical power, and you're fortunate enough to have personality power, which power do you think you need to lean on the most if you're going to be effective in leading people? Anybody? Not a trick question? This. Why you say that? Right. Anybody ever heard this axiom? Your attitude determines your altitude. Your attitude determines your altitude. 2 people, both of them have the same technical knowledge, skills, and ability. Both of them have like positions. They're both deputies, and they want to be the chief. If one has more personality power than the other, who's getting promoted when the chief retires? The guy with personality power. So my other challenge to you is, what are you doing now to make relationships, to network with the people that are sitting to your left and to your right, people that are in your barracks, or if you're off campus, the people that you've gotten to know when you were an underclassman. What have you done to connect with people? How are you learning to work in teams? Let me tell you something. Every one of us is interdependent. So that's how government works. Nothing that we do is done just in Dorchester County. Very specifically, in local government in South Carolina, there are municipalities. Municipalities are inside counties. So we have to work with municipalities. Right in this Tri-County region, Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester, there's a council of governments. When we get road funding, guide share for either urban roads or rural guide share for rural roads, it comes through the councils of government, which receive the money as a sub-grantee of the state of South Carolina, which receives the money as a sub-grantee of the Federal Department of Transportation, because it's all interconnected. So I went to the Pentagon, been twice, both times associated with the Lake Marion Regional Water Agency. First time I went to the Pentagon, I met with a guy named Mr. Hansen. Now, there's a department of the Army, and then there's a deputy secretary that works under the Secretary of the Army, and there are deputy assistant secretaries. I've had two occasions, one to meet with Eric Hansen, and then another to meet with another deputy assistant secretary, Mr. Letmon Lee. Well, when I went to meet with Mr. Hansen, I had turned in this application because we're trying to modify funding for our project so we can take this clean water that's imported to all of these different areas. Well, let me let you know a little secret. Later on, when we didn't get our application approved, I found out that Mr. Eric Hansen was Mr. No. Why do I say he was Mr. No? He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army that people were sent to when their projects were going to be turned down. Then later on, we had a conversation, full disclosure, with the lobbyist. This lobbyist told us that's not the right person to talk to. You need to talk to a guy named Letmon Lee. He's going to be retiring soon. But Mr. Lee has been here for 30 years, and he knows, because he works with the committees on public works and infrastructure in the House, and he can assist you with understanding what it's going to take to get in their budget so that you might get in the president's budget. Okay, good. So, with a little bit of personality power, we found out everything we could about Mr. Lee, and we sent him a letter. He agreed to meet with us, and so we went to the Pentagon. Any of you ever been to the Pentagon? Yeah. What's the Pentagon like? What is it like?
Pretty serious, all business.
All business. How many different rounds of security did you go through, before you were able to go into an office?
A lot.
So you sent your name ahead of time, right? And they did a background check on you, right? Then you went through metal detectors, right? Then at the elevators, there were some guys that were standing in uniform and they had M16 rifles. Am I telling the story like it is? And then you were able to be escorted to a specific office in the largest office building in the world, which is the Pentagon. Yeah. So we go and we meet with Mr. Letmon Lee in his office. And as we're going, I'm the last person going into the office. And then Letmon Lee says, "Where's Jason Ward? I need to meet this Jason Ward." So I meet him, and he comes over, and in a very unusual manner, since I don't know this fine gentleman, he hugs me. It's most uncomfortable. Well, why did he hug me? He says, "You know what? I know you're working with Congressman Clyburn. I know all about your project. I've read about your project. And you don't have to worry about anything. We've got your project in the budget. Your project qualifies. And we're making a recommendation that your project be placed, Congressman Clyburn's project, in the president's budget." So, first time, and I didn't say this earlier, Mr. Hansen couldn't even find our notebook that we had sent ahead. He said, "I think it got lost in the mail." The Pentagon is a large office building. It's the biggest office building in the world. "Oh, it just got lost in the mail. I'm so sorry." Well, Mr. Hansen, here's another copy of it, because we are prepared. So we brought many notebooks. So this is the project. On the other hand, Mr. Lee, he takes a copy of the draft bill, he opens it, and he points to the section 118 in the budget that's being recommended to the president by the Department of the Army. Why? What's the difference? The relationships, the personality power, a committed person who's interested in communities and not just marking time. So, here's the good news. I think I was supposed to have a real long time, maybe from 4:30, and did it go all the way up to an hour and 15 minutes?
Yeah, you're getting there.
Well, guess what? I'm not going to talk to you that long. I'm going to leave you with the two other principles. So, you've rejected passivity. You've accepted responsibility. You got to lead courageously. You know you're going to be attacked. You know there's going to be opposition and resistance. But then the next thing you got to do, and this is really important, you got to invest eternally. What do I mean by that? If you are not doing anything in your lifetime that has impact on someone beyond your lifetime, you're not doing anything worthwhile. Nothing at all. Yeah, I don't mean to make eye contact with you and make it personal. Yeah. But if you're not, what are you really doing? What if my parents didn't go to work? What if my mom didn't decide to go back to college? What if she didn't decide to graduate from college at 35? What if they didn't decide to give me a dictionary and a thesaurus? What if they didn't decide to hire a teacher to teach me how to read with their limited means? You know, funny thing about that, I never knew how poor my father was growing up. But I was over at South Carolina State University. And I was there trying to buy some football tickets because I wanted to see Florida A&M beat South Carolina State. So the game was on Saturday. I went by on my way back from Columbia to pick up some tickets. And I was trying to also get a place to tailgate because we had some friends coming in from out of state and out of town. And I ran into this guy, and his name was Dick Blake, Richard Blake. And he was on the city council of the city of Rockledge, Florida, which is the county seat of Brevard County. Most of you know about Cocoa, and you know about Kennedy Space Center, those types of places, all in that same county, but the county seat is Rockledge. So this guy looked at me, I had hair there. And when he looked at me, he saw back 50 years because I looked like my father. And he said to me, "I'm Dick Blake, what's your name?" I said, "Jason Ward." And he paused. He said, "Jason Ward." He said, "I used to coach a guy in football and basketball named John Ward. They called him Leander Ward. My middle name is Leander." I said, "Yeah, that was my father." He said, "That was 50 years ago." I said, "Wow." He said, "Now, the Ward children were very well behaved. And John's sister, Elizabeth, used to babysit my kids." I said, "Wow." He said, "Now, they were very humble means." That was his polite and diplomatic way of saying they were dirt poor. And my mom can attest there were times when they were growing up that they didn't have indoor plumbing. But now, because of those investments, because of those decisions, needing the GI Bill, willing to serve the country, going to Volusia County Community College, then Florida A&M, getting a job at the city of Tallahassee, working there 23 years till he died on the job in 1992. After I got a degree in broadcast journalism, I realized I was a little bit off base, a little bit misguided. And maybe the thing that he spent his life laboring in, city government, local government, that was for me. And his legacy is what I walk in. Because he decided to leave. He decided to leave where he was and go to this small town, leave Orlando and go to this small town called Tallahassee and make a better life for his family. Because he thought that if he stayed there, he'd have a better life. And so as a result of that, and my mom continued to encourage me, I went to graduate school. I left Florida. We packed it in. She did most of the driving. It was over 1,000 miles. I wouldn't sleep. But she got us there. And when we got there, she encouraged me on. Why? Because she's not the county administrator, but if she didn't lead me, I could have never been the county administrator. So, when she's long gone, and when I'm long gone, when that water flows to all these communities and people drink clean water, when they have water filling those hydrants to keep them safe. When the businesses come to Dorchester County, they may never know her name. They never met my dad because he passed in 1992, 10 years before I became in Dorchester County. But they're the leaders. And that is called cathedral thinking. That's the people, when you had the Catholic cathedrals, that they worked, they laid the stones, but you know what? They knew they never worshiped in that cathedral because their only job was to build a building. The guy that painted all the beautiful murals, installed the tapestry, he knew he never worshiped in that cathedral, but he was preparing the place for the next generation. So, it's not a story about religion, it's a story about life. Because you're doing that thing that's most important and prepares this country, this world for the next generation. My question to you is, what are you going to invest in eternally that will outlive you and it will be here for the next generation? So, hopefully in all of this, I've talked with you about the fact that one, if you have no integrity, you're going nowhere. You can be well trained, but if you don't have the right attitude, you're going to be thwarted. The fact of the matter is, very few people will lead. Very few people get involved in even voting, let alone putting themselves up to volunteer and serve. But I believe that you are the next generation of servant leaders. And I hope I've challenged you to step up and lead. Thank you very much.